Thanksgiving fun here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Lots to talk about today, including how the Pacers have missed Chris Duarte, where his absence has impacted the team the most, their poor starts to games, why they haven't been able to overcome them at all. Quite frankly, all of their stats look bad in first quarters, and Pacers Nets tonight in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Yes, we've seen Pacers Nets twice, but this one will be different. The Nets look totally different. We'll break down all that and more today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, tons to dive into. Tons of fun Thanksgiving topics coming your way. One, Chris Duarte. Where have the Pacers missed him the most? Where has his impact been missed by this team? Dove into the numbers. Obviously, some anecdotal stuff. You can see it. You watch the Pacers play. That we'll dive into. Despite Duarte's struggles, still a helpful player for this team. Then we'll talk about the Pacers' poor starts. Very fitting timing after they got smoked in the first 10 minutes again against Minnesota. And we'll close talking Pacers Nets. Pacers' final home game tonight in a while. Big game for them if they can take down the mighty Brooklyn Nets to kind of keep their season rolling. We'll start with Chris Duarte's absence, though. Thanks for making me your first listen today and every single day. Hope you're having a fun holiday break. If you're off, apologies if the audio or video quality is not very good. I am with the travel setup once again. Either way, we're talking Chris Duarte right now because I think his return could be on this upcoming road trip. It sounds like he's trending in that direction. That would be about a month since the injury. That's about how much LaMelo Ball missed with the same one. So if that is the case, how can he help? Where have they missed him the most? And I think some of it is sort of obvious stuff and some of it is less obvious stuff. And the obvious stuff is defense. Even still, right now on Thanksgiving, the Pacers' defensive rating is better with Chris Duarte on the court than off the court. I don't have to explain easy, obvious things to you. Like at the simplest level, he is their tallest wing defender option, and he's nosy and aggressive and strong at defending bigger wings. He's not like awesome at it, but he's good at it, right? He's one of the best Pacers at it. He might be the best. I think he's the best. I'd hear arguments for Nesmith's athleticism and Nembhard's poise, all that stuff, but I think Duarte's been the best at all those things, and they've missed that. Even still, they have a better defensive rating with Duarte on than off this year, which I think is noteworthy because in the stretch without him, they defended the Heat very well and held them under 100. They defended the Rockets very well and held them under 100, almost under 90. They defended I can't remember the other game they held the team under 100 for, but they held the Magic to 102, right? They've defended well in this stretch in his absence, and still their defensive rating is better with him on the court than off because he provides a size element, a tenacity element, a speed element, and in general, right, the percentage for opponents for the Pacers this year in 2-point percentage and 3-point percentage is about the same whether Duarte is on or off. But they get more steals and they rebound better with him out there because worse guys shoot the ball because Duarte's sometimes forcing the ball out of good players' hands, and it's easier to get rebounds when there's more misses, right? There's a lot of obvious things that happen by the numbers and by watching the Pacers because Duarte's out there. That's where their defense has shifted the most, is the possession battle, more so than specific forcing misses or specific scheme sort of things. That's where they've missed him the most. His size and his ability to blend that with his speed and aggressiveness has been gone in a way that has kind of helped other teams get easier shots or get rebounds, whatever you want to say, and that's where they've lost him. Now, the other thing is, this is a Rick Carlisle thing. They've lost some flexibility without Chris Duarte, right? Remember when I did the duos podcast, one of the best defensive duos for the Pacers this season was Duarte and Nembhard together because they're awesome perimeter defenders. They don't have that option. They just don't, right? They can't play two guys when one of them's not available. Nesmith and Nembhard is an okay defensive duo. It's been pretty good. But Duarte is just better, and they lose that flexibility and option, for example, when they want to close games, when they want to go with the defensive group, when obviously Chris Duarte is not available to play. So that is something they've lost, is lineup flexibility and the ability to get their best defensive five guys onto the floor. It's just been a tricky situation with him out, and they've defended fine, and in fact, their defense has improved dramatically this month from last month, but they still, again, were defending well with Duarte out there early in the season, even back to October, and that's why it's so jarring to see those numbers that the Pacers, who have been above average on defense for the better part of November, still right now have a better defensive rating with Duarte on the court than off. I think that's noteworthy. I think that's worth tracking. And I think that's where, when he returns, he will help this team the most. They'll get to getting a few more steals, a few more rebounds, and he's not useless on offense. Now, talking about his offense is weird because, the obvious thing, I did a whole podcast on this, I wrote about it, he was missing everything, right? He was missing a ton of open shots, he was struggling to get to that mid-range shot he was so good at last year, like all these things that made Chris Duarte a fantastic all-rookie team-level player were no longer the case to start this season until that 30-point explosion. So we'll get to his individual stats in a second, but he still provides value as a spacer. Like even this year, he was at 34% from deep when he got hurt, and that's not good. I think he would like to be better than that. I think he projects to be much better than that. That's acceptable, and he had got a rep last year as a shooter in a way that still provided spacing. Pacers' rim field goal percentage this season, 3 percentage points better with Duarte on the court than when he's on the bench. About 67% when he's out there and a little under 64% when he's on the bench, right? So that improvement is helpful. Spacing is helpful. This is also not rocket science, but they've lost that without him, right? They've had tougher looks at the rim, or, like Nesmith and Nembhard are worse rim finishers specifically than Chris Duarte is. Like they lose that specific skill on the wing as well, right? There's a lot of ways you could argue that. And then Duarte, is 62% at the rim for his career kind of player. They lose rim finishing ability without him, both as a team and as individuals. I think that's a big offensive loss that's been there. Pacers have been a good in the paint team this year, and they still lose rim percentage accuracy when he's not in there. Now, Duarte himself this year, again, I want to dive into him to close this out. He was scoring worse and not making shots. And the big improvements for him to me were blocking shots on the perimeter and a little bit on the interior, and passing, right? He was passing much better this year. Halliburton detailed that, his decision-making when he get double-teamed is better. Half the time last year, he's taking a fadeaway mid-range shot when he gets doubled. This year, he's passing in the right situations. It's not leading to assists, but it is leading to better shots for the whole team. Those are the biggest areas that he's grown, and I think those things will be very helpful for the team when he comes back, especially the passing element. But I think the biggest loss without Duarte is he can't improve on his, get out of his slump and figure out what lineups he fits well in, right? That it can't be ignored that he was missing a bunch of shots despite a good last 5 games for Duarte before getting injured. But Nembhard, for example, was helpful for the Pacers, but when Duarte got hurt, Nembhard moves in the starting 5, and all of a sudden the Pacers are like, oh, we figured out we can play this guy with this combination. He's very good as a chameleon with a bunch of lineups. Here's his good skill set. He's going to help us. Aaron Nesmith just had his best game of the season on Monday. He returned. They figured out how to use him as a defensive utility guy, right? They have, as the season evolved and the Pacers get better, figured out how these other wings can best help the team. They haven't had that luxury with Duarte because he wasn't a part of that evolution as the season progressed, right? That is somewhere where they have lost him. He couldn't find his footing with starters and all that sort of things, even while he himself was growing, right? I just said this, but he had the big 30-point game. Obviously, that's going to influence these numbers a little bit, but his last 5 games prior to the injury were 48% from the field, 41% from deep, 12.4 points per game, 3 rebounds, almost 90% from the foul line, right? He was rounding into some form. Even if you take out the 30-point game, the accuracy's still there. From deep, he had some nice games. He had the 12-point half in Chicago. I've explained all these things before on the show, but he had a horrible start. 6 for 23 in his first 3 games, but really kind of got out of that funk as the Pacers were trying to figure out where he best fit. They finally did, and then he got hurt. So now he hasn't had the same time on the wing to develop as that 3-and-D presence as these other guys. That, to me, is the biggest loss without Duarte. Beyond the injury stuff, beyond the defense stuff, beyond his own explosion in the game before it happened, they couldn't figure out the best way to continue that run of play, to find the best lineups that maximize his play, because he is a talented player, right? We saw that last year in a way that he wasn't at the start of this year. So that's the biggest thing, I think, for the Pacers to figure out when he gets reintegrated. It's not what is the best lineup for him to defend with. It's not how can they get his shooting back going. It's what groups does he fit the best with, and how can they maximize the number of minutes that he's playing with those lineups. Is it with Nembhard so they can defend really well? Is it with a specific guard that can get him the ball in the right places? Is it a big that he can occasionally do pick and roll with? All this stuff, that is where they're missing him the most, right? Now, Duarte's got to work on his own individual stuff beyond the Pacers trying to fit him in. Got to cut out some of those mid-rangers. He's definitely forcing it. His handle's better, but it's not quite leading to the perfect level of success for, assists and turnovers yet. He's got to use that to his advantage a little more. But right now, he's making better decisions. He's scanning and finding the right stuff. Can he add all that to his game when he is growing and figuring out how he'll fit with the team? That's what I want to see when he comes back. That's what the Pacers lost, is that ability to figure out all of that stuff, where he fits in the best, how he can help this team the best going forward. And that's what I'll be watching when he returns, because missing a month, I think his first couple games will not go particularly well for this Pacers team. Speaking of things that have not gone particularly well for this Pacers team, first quarters, holy moly, was their first quarter bad against Minnesota, and quite frankly, basically everybody this season. I want to talk about the Pacers' slow starts and dissect why I think they have been so poor. Before we do that, though, let me really quickly talk to you guys about someone new, ExpressVPN. We all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online, right? That's what VPNs are all about. But here's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows only available in other countries. Maybe you run out of stuff to watch on Netflix. This can change your world. ExpressVPN, you could watch The Office UK here in the United States. It's so simple to do. You sign into Netflix, fire up ExpressVPN app, change your location to UK, refresh Netflix, boom. There it is. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. So imagine all the Netflix libraries you can have, Korean dramas, you have South Korean Netflix, there's a bunch of other options, but it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason ExpressVPN is the best is you can watch shows with ridiculously fast speeds. There's no buffering or lag. You can stream in HD, no problem, and it works on all your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more. You can watch what you want when you want. So if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, expressvpn.com/lockedon. Right now, you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon. expressvpn.com/lockedon. To learn more, go check it out today. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, obviously Locked On Nets, Pacers Nets tonight. The Nets guys are breaking down Edmund Sumner, TJ Warren, and that whole Nets team very well this season. Let's talk about, speaking of first things, I'm on a roll with the segues today. The Pacers' first quarters. Holy moly, have they been miserable. I mean, everybody knows it, and it cost them the game last night. I mean, maybe Barron's a little aggressive with the stance, but the Pacers just lost the game by 14 on Wednesday, and they were down 17 after less than 10 minutes of play. It means they won the rest of the game. I mean, they didn't play perfect in that stretch. In fact, they gained a lead and lost it, so it's not totally fair to talk about it like that, but zoomed out picture, they won the last 38 minutes against the Timberwolves and still lost by 14 points, right? Their starts have been awful. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Every game, even teams that they end up beating handily. The Magic, they didn't get off. They beat the Magic by 21 points on Monday, right? They were losing at the end of the first quarter of that game. They were down 27-28, right? Like, you could go on and on with how bad the Pacers' first quarters have been. And we'll talk about one of the strengths of this team in this segment as a result of this, but it's been insane. So I wanted to dig up the numbers again today because, again, they're awful, they're worth talking about, and I want to dig into the why. The why is always important. It's not, someone commented this on YouTube, Joe Mapes, thank you for this. It's not the sickness that you want to diagnose and cure, it's what caused the illness, and how can you prevent it from happening again. I thought that was a good way of putting it. Pacers net ratings in first quarters this season. Worst in the league, almost minus 20 points per 100 possessions, right? That is unacceptably bad. 19.8 is their negative right now. Only 3 teams in the league are worse than minus 12. Pacers are at minus 20. The Lakers and Spurs being the other two. Miserable team to start games. You all know that. You've seen it. But the numbers bear out how bad it was. And still the worst after some much better kind of quarters recently, right? The Houston one hurt. The Minnesota one hurt. But they were, like, even being down 1 against the Magic after one quarter, like, will help their net rating quite a bit at this point. Like, they have a couple games like that recently where they've been a little closer, and they're still last by a healthy margin, right? Like, it's been really rough for the Pacers in the first quarter. So what's going wrong? What specific things can you point to and say, oh, that's the reason, or that's the reason, or that's the reason? How about all of them, right? I expected this to be something, when I dove into the numbers, that was more offensive-based, and that's not the case at all. So let's dive into the issues at hand for the Pacers. In fact, we'll start with the big one, turnovers to me. This is the big one, because the Pacers are a team that have been passing very well, creating shots for others, and generate good offense. So the first number I sorted by assist percentage. Were they having trouble setting up their teammates? No. In fact, this is the only good thing I'm going to say about the first quarter Pacers this whole segment. They're 9th in the NBA in assist percentage in first quarters. And I'm about to use that to say something negative because, yes, they're passing very well, and yet their assist-to-turnover ratio in first quarters is 28th in the league, 1.29. Brutal. Turn it over way too often in these first frames. Their turnover percentage in first quarters is the second worst in the NBA at 17.7%. Nearly 1 in every 5 Pacers possessions in first quarters right now are ending in a turnover. Like that just cannot happen for a team that is predicated so much on being really talented on offense. You can't be talented on offense if you don't have the ball, right? Miserably bad. They cannot, so many turnovers, they have to get over that. But no biggie, right? I'm gonna set out a lot of jokes at the segment. No biggie. You can make up your possessions another way, right? Teams lose the turnover battle all the time, but they win the rebounding battle, and lo and behold, they catch up on possessions. No biggie, right? The Pacers can make up that turnover rate. How about no? How about the Pacers' rebound percentage in first quarters? 27th in the NBA, 47.1%. That's not going to do it. And the Pacers have been a better rebounding team this year. They've also been a better passing team this year, but they suck at those two things in the first quarter. So no, they're not doing well on the glass. They're getting killed in the possession battle. That's a math problem. The Memphis Grizzlies were amazing at this last year. They never turned it over. They forced a bunch of turnovers, and they kicked butt on the glass. Even if they weren't more efficient than you, they had more chances to score than you, and they would win. A couple more teams are copying that strategy this year. Pacers have been much better at it. But this year specifically, it's not working that well. This year specifically in first quarters, it's not working that well. Pacers defensive rebounding in first quarters, 26th. Offensive rebounding, not much better at 17th. They've got to be better on the glass if they're going to turn it over so much, but they got to figure out both of those things. That said, it's a math problem. They give up more possessions. They give up a lot of easy chances when they're turning it over and giving up offensive rebounds. Easy chances for the other team means you'll never guess. The Pacers' defensive rating in first quarters is not good. 23rd in the league, 115.7. Can't do that, right? So you could easily point to the defense and say that's part of the reason the Pacers are starting games bad. And you can point to the Pacers' defense a lot this season as one of their biggest problems. But no matter, this team has been an offensive juggernaut all year. That's what's kept them winning, kept them above 500, kept them near the top of the East. Great offensive team. So surely in the first quarters, the Pacers can continue to make up for their poor defense with offense, right? No. Once again, the answer is no. We're going to continue to look at the opposites and say no. Pacers offensive rating in first quarters. Reminder who we're talking about here. We're talking about the Indiana Pacers, who are 10-7 and currently have the offensive rating of, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassing myself by not having the number right in front of my face, have one of the better offensive ratings in the entire NBA. I forgot to sort by team. 8th in the league, 113.7 offensive rating this year. High-powered offensive team, top 10 in the NBA, right? The Pacers have been a great offensive team. First quarter offensive rating for the Pacers this year, how about 96? Only two teams are below 104. Pacers are at 96. The Lakers, the only other team starting this poorly on offense. So usually how the Pacers can get by and how they've been winning, yeah, they defend okay. Their defense improves as the game goes on, but they can score. They have Tyrese Haliburton and Ben Mathurin, and Turner's been resurgent, and other guys have stepped up game by game. Not in the first quarter. No one has been good in the first quarter offensively. They have the worst true shooting percentage in the league in first quarters for a team that's been efficient and getting good shots and shooting well from three. That's crazy. 46%, only 5 teams below, that's effective field goal percentage. 50.4%, only 3 teams below 52%. They're almost below 50. Effective field goal percentage, they're also last. Only 5 teams below 50. They're at 46.1. I mean, they're just not getting good shots. They're not making them. Everything the Pacers do well doesn't happen in the first quarter. It's bizarre. It's not just that they're bad. They're awful at everything. They can't hit good shots. They can't generate them. They can't keep the ball in their hands. They can't get stops. They don't play like themselves. And so you go into an exercise like this. If you're me, try to figure out, okay, what's the thing they're doing wrong? How can they correct it? The thing they're doing wrong is everything, right? And so because they're a team that, look, this is where I'll give them a small positive from this. One of the strengths of this Pacers team is adjusting, playing well as the game goes on, figuring out what the other team is doing well, coming in, changing something, and winning. Right? That's very impressive. You can't adjust to nothing. Right? There's nothing that happens before the first quarter. So I understand that they might be a worse first quarter team all season, but they can't be this bad if they want to sustain success. Right? We just saw why against Minnesota. They just don't play like themselves at all. There's less spirit. There's less connectivity. There's less anything. They've had 4 to 5 starting 5, so I'm not going to point to the starting 5 and say anything. I've seen a lot of, they wouldn't start so bad if Mathurin started. And I guess I understand that, although him scoring more with the starters means the bench is much worse, and then they're still, in theory, losing by the same amount by the end of the quarter. He's also playing fantastic with the bench, and he would get less touches with the starters. We've been over this a million times. I don't necessarily agree with that, although maybe if we see it, it'll go better. Who knows? Either way. The Nembhard groups did a little bit better in there for a little bit. They got some defensive stability there, but not quite, right? They just do nothing well. Complete dumpster fire team in first quarters. They're a strong adjustments team, right? That's their thing. So how do you fix this? If you're an adjustments team that it's working really well, how do you start games better? That's hard to say. When every single stat is bad, it's hard to say. Because to me, when the issue is everything, when it's just a swath of everything, when the same lineups that are struggling in the first quarter come out in the second quarter and third quarter and fourth quarter and do great, it's not a lineup issue to me. It's almost a human issue to me. Right? A human element based thing. They start the game like not into it, or maybe their planning or execution of the plan, right? I'm not pinning this on any one person or anything, which is why I'm being very vague here, but somewhere along the way they just aren't themselves until the game has been going on for 8 to 10 minutes. And so there's a human element aspect to that they have to somehow get over. Maybe it's a mental hurdle they have to get over. Maybe it's a game day preparation thing they have to change. Maybe it's somehow beating scouting reports into guys' heads better. I don't know exactly what it is. When so many things are wrong, it could be several things. But they have to be better in this way if they want to be winning games still as the season progresses. Now, last year, they were 23rd in first quarter net rating. That's why I struggled earlier with my tabs and talking, because I accidentally still had last year's numbers up for this research project. That said, 23rd in first quarter net rating last year. It's not good. They had some poor starts last year. Their offense was fine in first quarters last year. In fact, it was okay, closer to league average. It was their defense that was just totally miserable. 13th in offensive rating in first quarters last year, dead last in defensive rating, right? So this year, the defense has been bad, and the offense has also not been very good. So their defense was awful as a team last year. It's been better this year, more normal in that way. So to me, it's more of a this team thing, and they need a sec to read the game and get into their game flow and all that sort of stuff. But they have to prep better from a human element, from a mental standpoint, from an execution of a plan standpoint, all that stuff. The second the tip happens, they've got to be better at that stuff. And I just said a lot of stats and a lot of stuff that my solution comes down to. You just got to be better. But it's not just being better as in playing better. It's about preparing better, being in the right mindset when the game starts so that you can play Orlando like they did Monday, be tied or down one, whatever, after the first quarter. And then because you're such a good adjusting team, look at that. You make adjustments and you win by 20, right? That's the kind of thing that good teams do. And that's what the Pacers need to do, is figure out how to start these games better. You know who they didn't start well against this season? The Brooklyn Nets earlier this season, although they did win one of those games. Let's talk about Pacers Nets tonight. Pacers final home game until almost December 10th. My goodness, they have a long road trip coming up. And we'll dive into the Nets, who the Pacers have played twice, but you should still want to learn more about them because they have a different head coach. They play differently. They're a much, much different Nets team than the one you saw the Pacers play late in October. Before we do that, though, let me talk to you guys about SweatBlock, a product I use literally every single day. One of their customer reviews comes from Jennifer. She used to wear multiple shirts, fold toilet paper into her armpits. Got to do something to hide that embarrassing sweat. Big problem for her. No more problem. Thanks to SweatBlock, their wipes, their deodorant, it is fantastic. I will be your voucher here. I use their deodorant every day. I use their wipes fairly often. I talked about this yesterday, but Cambridge Fieldhouse is either super hot or super cold on game days. On the hot days, I was sweating way too much. Now, SweatBlock comes in, saving the day for me. The wipes have been a bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years with over 10,000 5-star reviews. Do not miss the opportunity to try SweatBlock. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try SweatBlock. Save 20% with the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. That's sweatblock.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. Check it out today. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, hop on over to Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, wherever you listen to or get your podcast. Let's finish up today's show talking about the Nets. You've seen the Pacers play the Nets twice. They set a franchise record for threes made the first time. They scored a bunch of points the second time, but still lost because the Nets still have that Kevin Durant guy on their team. The Nets head coach back then was Steve Nash. That was before their entire stuff hit the fan and Ben Simmons missed time. It's impossible how much has happened to the Nets since the last time the Pacers played them, which was like 25 days ago. It's crazy. They're a totally different team. They're 8-5 since the Pacers beat them with that 22-point game, and they're finding much more of a groove recently, as you expect from a Kevin Durant team. The Nets are much better. This is going to be a much tougher test than the very wobbly, worst defensive team in the league Nets that the Pacers played in late October with a different coach with some different roster things going on. And that's why this game is going to be much more interesting, right? Kyrie Irving is back. Since he's returned, he's played in 3 games. They beat Memphis, who's very good. They beat Toronto, who's very good. He's been awesome, personally. He's plus 23 in those 3 games. Kyrie Irving's just good. And Tyrese Halliburton, those are the kind of guys he really struggles with, those crafty guards who can side to side get around him. Halliburton is a fast defender. He's not a very shifty, slide his feet kind of defender. That's a tough matchup for the Pacers. He's been good, as has Kevin Durant. I don't have to explain Kevin Durant to you. His streak of 25-plus point games to start the season just ended, and yet he's still averaging 29 points per game on 53.4% shooting. He is the best scorer on the planet. Debate your fridge, not me. And then also, the big thing for the Nets, and part of their surge is Ben Simmons is playing well, right? He was bad to start the season. A lot of questions about his ability to even look at the rim and score. Then he missed some time with an injury, right? Then he missed another game with an injury against the Lakers. Now he's back. Last 5 games for Ben Simmons since he returned. 15 points, 7 rebounds, 6.5 assists per game, and shooting 79% from the field in that span. He only shot less than 70% in 1 of those 4 games, and he's taking a lot of shots, right? 8 per game. That's crazy efficiency. They have unlocked his offense a little bit. He's still an all-world defender, so now they have the 3rd star, and that's why the Nets are much, much better. Since the Pacers beat them, they fired Steve Nash right after the Nets actually beat the Pacers. Totally different team. They're defending much better. They're up to 17th in defensive rating this year. They were awful for those 2 Pacers-Nets games earlier in the month, right? There's a lot you guys know about the Nets. You saw them play, but they're a totally different team now. They're efficient, and they're fine. They keep the ball. They don't turn it over a ton. So they play a lot of set defense. That's the consequence of playing against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. That's why they're able to have a decent defensive readiness despite being not the best in terms of actual talent on the roster. So Pacers can't really capitalize in the way they want to. When they're going against set defenses all the time, that's going to be hard against stars, right? The Pacers beat this team because they were finding threes within the flow of their normal half-court offense. That's going to be key again against the Nets. That's something that is still true about the Nets between this time and last time. They still have the stars that can put the ball in the basket, make life hard for the Pacers to get in transition. That's where the Pacers will have to thrive. Can they get their half-court offense to generate those good threes? Something else the Nets did better, and something that the Pacers kicked their butts in earlier, their rotation is more balanced, right? They've got Edmund Sumner playing more, Yuta Watanabe, who I don't think will play on Friday, has been good for them. Seth Curry's back. Cam Thomas is actually playing again, right? Markieff Morris, Patty Mills, all these guys coming off the bench. Some of them missed the first Pacers game. Some of them just weren't in the rotation at all. Jacques Vaughn, their new coach, it seems like he's got everybody playing a role that makes more sense. And so the Pacers pinch points where, they were dominating the bench minutes. They were killing them on the glass. All this stuff. Some of those are still there, but some of those are much harder to do against an improved next team. Now, the Nets still suck at rebounding, right? Their defensive rebounding rate is 29th in the league right now. That's terrible. They're 28th in the league in total rebounds. Nick Claxton's okay on the glass. Ben Simmons is okay on the glass, right? They've got some guys who can do okay, but they're not a very good defensive rebounding team. That's somewhere the Pacers can get advantages if their 3-ball isn't falling. You don't see a big game for Smith, Turner, whoever the third big is, if Isaiah Jackson's back or if it's Goga, again, they must be good on the glass, right? That is one way the Pacers can against a team that's going to be more efficient than them, right? Quite frankly, the Nets stars mean they're going to be more efficient shooting the ball. But can the Pacers get more possessions in that way, right? Rebounding was killer for the Pacers versus Minnesota. They lost, I think, by 12 in the rebounding battle that game. If they want to beat the Nets, that can happen. Even if I think if the Pacers lose the rebounding battle, they basically will lose this game to me. And I usually am very against using the rebounding battle as a swing factor. I think it matters quite a bit in this game. Now, Brooklyn, not so good at forcing turnovers, right? The Pacers do pass a lot. That leads to some turnover issues. We talked about that in their first quarter segment. Brooklyn, 21st in turnovers forced. In actual steals, they're a little below average in the league. Pacers got to take care of the ball. Tyrese Halliburton's got to take care of the ball against this Nets team. They're going to try to get him out of his game, but they've got to be sharp with their passing. Halliburton in particular obviously feels important there. McConnell, even Buddy Hield, who had a couple the other night, must be better there. Now let's talk about the Nets defense a little bit. That's been better, right? Up to 17th in the league. They give up the top 10 3-point percentage. They give up a lot of open threes. They give up the 6th lowest 2-point percentage. I just got those numbers wrong. Excuse me. They give up the 3rd worst 3-point percentage at 38.1%. They give up the best 2-point percentage. They're excellent at defending twos. Nick Claxton's great. Durant's length is great. Simmons is great. They are horrible at defending the 3-point line. The Pacers obviously exploited that in one of their wins this year. That's something the Pacers have to do well. Their shot profile does lend to a lot of threes, like 40 of them in a game. If the Pacers make their threes, that one prevents the Nets from chances to be fighting on the glass. You don't get a turnover if you take a good three, right? If the Pacers shoot 40% from three, they will be in this game. It's just something the Nets are very bad at defending. There will be a lot of opportunities there. So a lot of stuff about the new look Nets and their star-studded team and their new coach point to 2 players to me. Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner. Two of the better Pacers this entire season. Duh, they have to be good. But if Halliburton on offense doesn't have another dud like he did, only 10 points against Minnesota, and sets up his teammates well for threes, doesn't turn it over more than maybe 3-4 times, that will set up the Pacers offense to be good enough to beat the Nets. But they still have to get their stops, and that player number 2 is Miles Turner. Got to slow down the Nets attacks. They're 6th in the league in 2-point percentage. They get to the rim. They've got the talent to do it. And he's got to rebound. That's going to be big for him. He's been better at that this month, maybe the best rebounding month of his whole career. But against the Nets, who aren't the greatest at rebounding, you cannot give KD and Kyrie Irving extra possessions. Miles must rebound well. It will be a fun game. We'll be, of course, breaking it down on next Monday's Locked On Pacers, along with whatever happens in Pacers Clippers, Pacers PG, on this coming Sunday. Lots of games coming up for the Pacers. They have a back-to-back coming Sunday, Monday. We'll, of course, break it all down here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you're still here, much appreciated. Tweet at me at TEastNBA. Tell me your favorite thing you ate on Thanksgiving, and I will tell you mine. I hope everybody had a fun holiday. If you did celebrate, if you did not, I hope you had a safe and great weekend. We'll be back Monday talking Pacers, of course. Till then, everybody, have a great day.